Hi, Right Writers. Thank you so much for joining us today with Cruz here. We are going to be looking at a literary device called Allusion, Allusion. So that is what this video is going to be looking at today, Allusion. We are going to find text evidence based on the poem that we will be reading on the left of your screen on Being Brought from Africa to America by Phyllis Wheatley. And we will be creating a middle school paragraph along with a high school, or what I would also call an upper level paragraph. If allusion is something that you struggle with as far as finding it and understanding it, please stay tuned in this video. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before you dive into trying to find the text evidence and even unpacking the poem or whatever it is that you're reading, it's important to have a working definition. What does allusion actually mean? So when you think of the word allusion, I want you to think of an opportunity for you to consider. I'm going to expand this screen so we can make it just a bit bigger here. So I want you to think of when a writer refers to something else. So a writer is referring, writers refer to something else. To something else, and you can even think about it as something else or someone else. And so if you know who or what they are referring to, then you understand what they are alluding to. So allusion represents the noun. And if I change the suffix and I want to make it a verb, I make the word allude. So when you allude to something else, you are referring to something or someone else. Again, it could be anything from a song. You can allude to a famous person. You can refer to a work of art, any type of art. You can be referring to a book, a character, some sort of historical event. You can be referring to the Bible. You can be referring to anything from mythology. It can be a comic book, a video game, folklore. So, I mean, really, it can be anything. It could be a movie that you're referring to, a television show, a Netflix series. So really anything or anyone. And I hope I'm getting that across, right, writers, that when I say something else or someone else, I mean the sky is the limit. So what you can be alluding to or creating an allusion from. So you may be asking yourself, well, why is it so confusing to find this literary device? Why is it so confusing for readers? Well, one of the reasons why is that the writer assumes that you know what they're talking about. So there is a level of assumption or background knowledge that the writer assumes you have. Again, let me repeat why this can be confusing for readers is that the writer assumes that you, as the reader, will pick up on the allusion. It can be confusing for people who are different, who have a culturally different background. Or again, you have to have a certain amount of background knowledge to pick up on the allusion. So if you have ever wondered why it might be confusing for students, for other people, including yourself, it may be that, again, you lack the background knowledge to understand the allusion, or you may be from a culturally different background, and so that allusion really kind of goes over your head. It passes by you. And again, when I mean culturally different, you can even argue a geographically different background. Because sometimes I think one of the things that I've noticed as I've moved into the South in different states, and specifically Alabama, there are things that are said that I do not get. I don't understand it. because I'm not from the South. And so I miss a lot of allusions in social situations because I'm just not from the area. And so you could also argue, even if you're geographically from a different location, that may also hinder you from picking up on the allusions. So now that we have a working definition on what allusion is and why it might be confusing to readers, we're going to look at a poem. Keep in mind, this was written in the late 1700s. And so just have that in the back of your mind as you look at this poem. And one of the reasons I selected this poem by Phillis Wheatley is because it's a great poem to use not only for allusion, but also for another literary device that we will be looking at in a different video called allegory. And be on the lookout for that on our YouTube channel here on Write Writers with Cruz. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I read the poem and that I understand the poem first, and then we'll start finding out our text evidence. So I'm going to go ahead and set myself up for success. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste the article or the poem's link. And I want to make sure that I have the title of my poem, that I have it written correctly with the correct capitalization that's provided. So on being brought from Africa to America, notice that from and to are not capitalized. And I also want to make sure that I spell Phillis Wheatley's name correctly. So that's Phillis and Wheatley. So make sure that you also check your spelling on writers. And again, checking your title, making sure that everything is punctuated and capitalized in the way that it was intended. And let's take a look at On Being Brought from Africa to America by Phillis Wheatley. 'Twas mercy brought me from my pagan land, taught my benighted soul to understand that there's a God, that there's a Savior too. Once I redemption neither sought nor knew. Some view our sable race with scornful eye. Their color is a diabolic dye. Remember, Christians, Negroes, black as Cain, may be refined and join the angelic train. All right, let's take that poem again from the top, On Being Brought from Africa to America by Phillis Wheatley. 'Twas mercy brought me from my pagan land, taught my benighted soul to understand that there's a God, that there's a Savior too. Once I redemption neither sought nor knew. Some view our sable race with scornful eye. Their color is a diabolic dye. Remember, Christians, Negroes, black as Cain, may be refined and join the angelic train. So we're looking for allusion, and it's when the writer is referring to something or someone else. And it requires you to have the background knowledge to pick up on who or what that is referring to. So I want to give you a moment to think about that. Again, writer referring to something else or someone else, a song, a famous person, art, book, character, history, historical figure, historical event, a video game, folklore, movie, television show, the Bible, a Netflix series, mythology, and I can go on and on and on. So thinking about that, what would you identify for an allusion? Cain is ultimately where the allusion takes place in this poem. Keep in mind, this is a one stanza poem. And this poem, you may have picked up, by the way, on the rhyme scheme. It does have a rhyme scheme. And it also has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines. And Cain is where the allusion takes place. Why? Well, you have to know Cain's backstory to understand what she means when she says, remember, Christians, Negroes black as Cain may be refined and join the angelic train. And let's go ahead and identify our text evidence, because really that is where we see the allusion taking place. So I'm taking the text evidence. Remember, Christians, Negroes, black as Cain. And now I'm going to go ahead and use a forward slash to let the reader know that there's another line that comes after this one. And I'm referencing that line. And I'm also going to use my ellipses to let the reader know that there were lines that came before it. If you wanted to do this as well, to add a forward slash, you are more than welcome to do that, to let the readers know that also there was, this is its own line on its own. This is its own poetry line. So in typing this up here, so remember, Christians, Negroes black as Cain, and I want to make sure that, again, I type it exactly as written. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and move this down here and say, may be refined. And notice the apostrophe usage, and join. And she doesn't say the, but it is implied that E is invisible, and that E is invisible right here under refined, but it's written like this. And so again, I wanted to make sure, that's why I referenced this poem is from the late 1700s. And so here we have our line from the poem, and I can sort of move it like this, and so that way you can see it a little bit better. And so we can have it like this to be presented. So this happens in lines 7 and 8, so we may want to reference that and just have that in our background before we begin our middle school paragraph. So also, please remember, what do you notice about Christians, Negroes, and Cain? And you notice, hopefully, that the font is different. So this font is in italics, so I want to make sure that I do the same. Before we begin our middle school paragraph, here's the catch with allusion. This is why it can be very challenging for students. So we have to make sure that we talk about the allusion about Cain. So we have to know his background, or have some working background knowledge on Cain before we actually write our paragraph. So what are some things about Cain that we know? Well, we know that he was the son of Adam and Eve. We know that he was also brother to Abel. We know that this Cain is referenced in the Old Testament, and you could even be more specific in Genesis. We know that Cain murdered his brother. And we also know that Cain was, why did he murder his brother? Why did he murder Abel? Well, because Cain was jealous of Abel. So Cain was jealous of his brother, and Cain was punished. Cain was punished and banished, basically, from Eden, from this, place, this kingdom, because of what he did. So Cain was punished and banished. And you could even say, Cain suffered from internal conflict. If you were looking at Cain as if he was a character in a story, In a fiction piece, you could, again, even argue, well, if it was a fictional story, Cain, if I looked at Cain in that way as this character, I would say Cain suffered from internal conflict. You could also call it internal turmoil, but no doubt he suffered from internal conflict. In Cain's mind, Cain thought or felt that God favored Abel. So if you disagree with me or you find something that's wrong, then let's fix it. Fix it on your end in your paragraph. I'm just working on my background knowledge, and I recognize that there might be some areas where I am slightly incorrect. And so this is my first draft. So keep that in mind, right, writers, that anytime really in any video that I'm creating with you, I always want to make it a first draft because I want you to feel what I feel like as an adult when I'm approached with something, that I'm not as familiar with or as comfortable with, and I'm put on the spot to create paragraphs from it. And that's part of helping you see how the process of writing works. Now that I have all this information, now I can use it not only for my middle school paragraph, but I'm also going to be able to use this information for my upper level or high school paragraph as well. And if you're starting to realize why allusion is challenging for students, now you understand why. Because not only did we have to read the poem, but we had to do all of this, find the text evidence, and then take a moment to brainstorm the background knowledge on Cain. So we had to come up with background knowledge for the allusion first before we begin even our paragraph. All right, so I want to start with Phyllis Wheatley. So I'm again being very direct, being very intentional, and I'm immediately starting the paragraph. Phyllis Wheatley's poem. And at this case, I can go ahead and copy and paste her title. So Phyllis Wheatley's poem on being brought from Africa to America. And again, I want to give my readers, my GPS here uses allusion. So I'm being very direct, very intentional. I named the poem. I named I gave the title of the poem, told readers it was a poem, told readers who wrote the poem, and I'm letting the reader know, hey, by the way, we're looking at allusion. Now I want to make sure that I give the definition. So what is allusion? Going back, allusion is when writers refer to something or someone else, but again, you have to have the background knowledge to understand it. So here's how I'm going to write my definition. Allusion is when a writer makes a reference to someone or something. Now, I'm going to include this, even though I didn't have this, to someone or something of importance. And the reason why I'm arguing that it's important is because if it was not important, then the writer would not include that information. Therefore, from my perspective, I feel like when a writer uses an allusion, they expect you to know that because it's important as far as how you analyze what they actually wrote. So that's why I'm going to say that. All right, let's take it from the top, right, writers? Phyllis Wheatley's poem on being brought from Africa to America uses allusion. Allusion is when a writer makes a reference to someone or something of importance. Okay, so I've told the writer where we're going. I've given a definition. Now I want to provide the text evidence. So I want to do that next because I want to make sure that the reader knows, hey, I need the text evidence to prove this allusion. So let's talk about it, and let's use a transition word by saying, for example. Or you can also say, for instance, for example. Now, it happens in line 7 or 8, and you could also argue in the final lines of the poem. And we're going to say this, for example, the narrator, and now we're going to use our text evidence. As I lead into this, I want to look at what is going on here. So we've got background knowledge, Old Testament Genesis, son of Adam and Eve, brother to Abel, murdered his brother, jealous, punished, banished, suffered from internal conflict. Cain felt that God favored his brother Abel. So, and then thinking about this text evidence, remember, Christians, Negroes black as Cain may be refined and join the angelic train. Okay, so what is Phyllis Wheatley actually doing in this line of the poem? Remember, Christians, Negroes black as Cain. If you are noticing, you may notice, hey, Cruz, this is a simile. Isn't that a simile, comparing black to Cain? Yes, you are right. And if you're comparing black to Cain, but you have this right next to it, Negroes black as Cain. So who is she really comparing to? It's a simile comparing Negroes or blacks, or you could even argue black Christians to Cain. So that's really what Phyllis Wheatley is doing in this particular piece here. So let's say it. For example, the narrator uses a simile disguised as an allusion. Remember, Christians, Negroes black as Cain may be refined and join the angelic train. Now I want to talk about the simile, but then I also want to talk about the allusion. So Wheatley compares Negroes to the Old Testament's Cain. And again, Negroes black as Cain. So why do you think that she did that? You cannot pick up on the allusion unless you have the background knowledge. Readers who know Cain's biblical story understand that Cain murdered his brother, was jealous of his brother, that Cain was jealous of his brother and murdered him because he felt as if God favored his brother Abel. Cain suffered from internal, and notice how, again, I'm using a lot of this information that we have here that we had brainstormed to ensure our success. Cain suffered from internal conflict. And now we'll take a look at it, and I can assure you, right writers, that we're going to be adjusting this. Phyllis Wheatley's poem, Being Brought from Africa to America, uses allusion. Allusion is when a writer makes a reference to someone or something of importance. For example, in the poem, the narrator uses a simile disguised as an allusion. Remember, Christians, Negroes black as Cain may be refined and join the angelic train. And maybe I can say I need a transition word. Here, Wheatley compares Negroes to the Old Testament's Cain. Readers who know Cain's biblical story understand that he was jealous of his brother Abel and murdered him because he felt as if God favored his brother. As if God favored his brother. And Cain suffered from internal conflict. I'm going to take that part out. I'm not really seeing how that flows. So let me go back just one sentence here. Readers, and I know this is a really long sentence, by the way, right, writers. Readers who know Cain's biblical story understand that he was jealous of his brother Abel and murdered him because he felt as if God favored his brother. After the murder, Cain was punished and banished, or you could even say Cain was banished. And so after the murder, Cain was banished. And so he sort of felt like almost like an outsider, really. And so this idea of Cain being banished, and so this, it caused him to kind of, he lashed out because he felt like God favored Abel, and so then he was punished and banished. But what's interesting is the way that Phyllis Wheatley uses the allusion, because she says, remember Christians, remember. Notice the comma usage. Look at how many commas she has here. So thinking about how Wheatley is using this, it's almost as if, there's a contrast here, because she says, remember. Again, notice this comma usage. Remember, comma, Christians, comma, Negroes, comma, black as Cain, comma. So, and another comma may be refined. So if you do the pausing, remember, Christians, Negroes, black as Cain, may be refined and join the angelic train. So, what is she really saying there? She doesn't say remember white Christians, but she's implying that, because you've got Christians and then right after that Negroes, and then she uses black as Cain. And if you go back to the poem itself, right, writers, you see this reference here. Some view our sable race with scornful eye. Then she's got quotation marks, almost as if these other Christians are having a conversation. Their color, the color of their skin, their color is a diabolic dye. So diabolic, what does it mean to be diabolical? Well, think about the Latin diabolo. What does that really mean? Well, it means the devil. So in this case, there's no doubt that, she uses that race, she uses the word color, and then she says it again with black. So, we've got to sort of pick up on what she's arguing here. And so she's reminding Christians, and specifically white Christians, that even though we are black and we may be black as Cain, we will be going to heaven too. So maybe, and interesting, she uses the helping verb, may be refined and join the angelic train. So thinking about that, now let's take a look at this back end of after this text evidence. Here, Wheatley compares Negroes to the Old Testament's Cain. Readers who know, and maybe I'll say his biblical story, readers who know his biblical story understand that Cain was jealous of his brother Abel and murdered him because he felt as if God favored him, his brother. After Abel's murder, Cain was banished. After Abel's murder, Cain was banished. And so you could argue Cain was banished. However, and so, really what Phyllis Wheatley is arguing is that, maybe, they have a place in, Black Christians have a place in heaven too. So she's using Cain sort of in a positive way. However, Wheatley uses Cain, and so you could say, however, Wheatley uses Cain in a positive way. And so you could argue again, uses the Cain, and you could even say uses the Cain allusion in a positive way, And so thinking about that in a positive way, because in this case, thinking about that, it's arguing that because in this case, again, thinking about this, however, Wheatley, let me go back a little bit. Readers who know his biblical story understand that Cain was jealous of his brother Abel and murdered him because he felt as if God favored his brother. After Abel's murder, Cain was banished. However, Wheatley uses the Cain allusion in a positive way because she argues that that Black Christians in this case will have a place in heaven, will have a place in heaven. And you could say, and join, and if you wanted to bring in that text evidence again, and join the angelic train, and join the angelic train. And so we're using the text evidence again to make our argument. And so now we want to wrap up our paragraph. And so we want to do that. So let's take it from the top here and see what we have. Phyllis Wheatley's poem on being brought from Africa to America uses allusion. Allusion is when a writer makes a reference to someone or something of importance. For example, in the poem, the narrator uses a simile disguised as an allusion. Remember, Christians, Negroes black as Cain may be refined and join the angelic train. Here, Wheatley compares Negroes to the Old Testament's Cain. Readers who know his biblical story understand that Cain was jealous of his brother Abel and murdered him because he felt as if God favored his brother. After Abel's murder, Cain was banished. However, in the poem, and I want to go back to the poem, however, in the poem, Wheatley uses the Cain allusion in a positive, and we could even say in a positive light, because she argues that Black Christian will have a place in heaven and join the angelic train. And so you could say, therefore, Wheatley uses an allusion to, now we want to wrap up by ending where we began. Therefore, Wheatley uses an allusion, uses Cain. Now, I don't want to say allusion back to back. So uses Cain in a positive light because she argues that Black Christians will have a place in heaven and join the angelic train. Therefore, Wheatley uses the Cain allusion to reference someone of biblical importance. And so we could say that, and that could wrap up our paragraph here on our allusion of Cain. Let's take a look at what we have, right, writers? Phyllis Wheatley's poem on being brought from Africa to America uses allusion. Allusion is when a writer makes a reference to someone or something of importance. For example, in the poem, the narrator uses a simile disguised as an allusion. Remember, Christians, Negroes black as Cain may be refined and join the angelic train. Here, Wheatley compares Negroes to the Old Testament's Cain. Readers who know his biblical story understand that Cain was jealous of his brother Abel and murdered him because he felt as if God favored his brother. After Abel's murder, Cain was banished. However, in the poem, Wheatley uses Cain in a positive light because she argues that Black Christians will have a place in heaven and join the angelic train. Therefore, Wheatley uses the Cain allusion to reference someone of biblical importance in a positive way. And you could say, instead of positive, because I want to use a synonym, but I don't want to say positive two times. So we could say, therefore, Wheatley uses the Cain allusion to reference someone of biblical importance in an optimistic way. And there, right, writers, would be a very, a decent first draft example of how Wheatley is using the Cain allusion. Thank you so much, Right Writers, for sticking it out with our middle school paragraph. Now we're going to go deeper into the why into our text evidence. Why does Phyllis Wheatley use Cain? What's the reason behind that? What's the reason behind this allusion of, remember Christians, Negroes black as Cain may be refined and join the angelic train. Now, our middle school paragraph did a pretty good job of thinking about some of that why, and we talked about how Phyllis Wheatley is comparing, using a simile to compare Negroes or Black Christians to Cain specifically, because it says, remember, Christians, Negroes black as Cain may be refined and join the angelic train. But what's also interesting about this allusion is that she uses this italics. So she changes the font. We've got Christians, Negroes, and Cain all in a different font from everything else. So we may also want to pick up on the font change, and specifically that this is in italics, that the italics reference, why do this? Why have Christians, Negroes, and Cain all be capitalized, number one, and also in italics? Why have that font be different? Well, could it be part of the reason why is that this is basically her audience? Are these her readers that she's referring to? Is she referring to saying, hey, I'm talking to you. I'm talking to you, Christians. I'm talking to you, Negroes, and I'm talking about Cain. So in this case, could it also be referring to the audience or her readership? Could this be some of the reasons why she has Christians, Negroes, and Cain in italics and also have it capitalized? So that's something to be thinking about in this particular allusion. And so we want to make sure that we think about that when we're thinking about this poem. And so thinking about this simile, that it's, why do this? Well, it's a simile comparing Negroes to, or Black Christians to Cain. She's got a font change, italics and capitalized, because, she's being very specific as to who she's talking to, specific with her audience. And why else do this? Is this sort of letting people know that, again, that this idea of, I understand that I recognize that you view us as the other. So could that be also why this reference to remember Christians black as Negroes black as Cain? So is she taking a moment to understand that she knows that white Christians view black Christians like a Cain? Like, do they even view themselves as Abel? And do they view their black, do they view black Christians as Cain? That's something to think about. And so that's something that I'm inferring here as a right writer. And so if you're thinking something else, right writers, then do that. Then create your own ideas of, what is Phyllis Wheatley implying here? What is she really saying? Well, for me, it shows that she understands. It understands that she knows that white Christians view black Christians as the other. So, she recognizes that. And she's referencing that in the poem. Again, I understand that we're talking about the late 1700s, but I'm putting it out there. She understands and she knows that white Christians view black Christians, perhaps in a negative way. And maybe, they see themselves as the Abel and the black Christians as the Cain. Maybe you might argue I'm thinking too deep about this. But again, that's my prerogative as a writer. I have the choice. I have the power, and you, as the writer, have the power to come up with your own ideas, to come up with your own opinions on why she might be doing this. So, again, I'm going to go ahead and view this. Do white Christians view themselves as able, while the Black Christians view themselves as Cain? This is a question I'm wondering. And again, it's open to interpretation. This is our why section. We don't know why. That's what we have. So thinking about our upper level paragraph, or what I would also call our high school paragraph, I'm going to go ahead, right, writers, and copy and paste all that work that we've done so far. And again, all we're really doing is leveling up our vocabulary. And we're leveling up our whys. We're bringing up more information than we did on our middle school paragraph, because we want to make sure that, that we level up. I mean, that's really what this is about, is making sure that we level up as writers. And, it's the same information and thinking about it from a middle school standpoint, but now we want to bring it up, quite a bit here. This idea, we're inferring more. I mean, essentially, again, remember, when you're asking why questions, you're essentially analyzing. You're analyzing the why, and you're inferring. We can't sit Phyllis Wheatley down and ask her these questions, and so we have to come up with our own ideas. We have to come up with our own whys. And so in this particular section, I'm going to go ahead and borrow some of this, the ideas that we came up with our why, and I'm going to move it down so I can look at, in this case, I can look at, include it in our paragraph. Let's take a look at what we have. Phyllis Wheatley's poem on being brought from Africa to America uses allusion. Allusion is when a writer makes a reference to someone or something of importance. For example, in the poem, the narrator uses a simile disguised as an allusion. Remember, Christians, Negroes black as Cain may be refined and join the angelic train. Here, Wheatley compares Negroes to the Old Testament's Cain. Readers who know his biblical story understand that Cain was jealous of his brother Abel and murdered him because he felt as if God favored his brother. And maybe here I can change he to Cain, because Cain felt as if God favored his brother. After Abel's murder, Cain was banished. And so in this case, however, here's where I may want to add, understand that she knows that white Christians view black Christians in a negative way. And so in this case, I'm going to bring that in. I'm going to bring in, after Abel's murder, Cain was banished. Wheatley, indeed, and I love that transition word because it implies emphasis. Indeed, Wheatley understands and knows that white Christians view black Christians in a negative way. In that, and maybe not all white Christians, but again, she said some view our sable race with scornful eye. And so in some, so I'm going to say knows, understands and knows, and I'm just going to say that certain white Christians view black Christians in a negative way. In a negative way. Or in a negative light, you could say, in a negative light. And you can even, and maybe I will stop on that part and just say, indeed, Wheatley understands and knows that certain white Christians view black Christians in a negative light. However, in the poem, Wheatley uses Cain in a positive light because she argues that black Christians will have a place in heaven and join the angelic train. Therefore, Wheatley uses the Cain allusion to reference someone of biblical importance in an optimistic way. And so in this case, I think this could work, but I almost want to bring in the font change or the italics, and that she's specifically referring to an audience. So here Wheatley compares Negroes to the Old Testament's Cain, and then we go into Cain's story. Indeed, Wheatley understands and knows that certain white Christians view Black Christians in a negative light. And I'm adding more information, so I'm going to use the transition word in addition. In addition, she even changes the font to speak to her audience, to speak to a specific audience, to speak to a certain audience, specifically. So specifically, again, Christians, Negroes, specifically Christians and Negroes. And you can even add that in because, again, this idea of, and I know Cain is also italicized, but there's no doubt that she's speaking to a specific audience. In addition, she even changes the font to speak to a certain audience. Changes the font to address a certain audience. Let me say to address a specific audience, to address her specific audience. Her specific audience, Christians and Negroes. Christians and Negroes. And then I can say, however, in the poem, Wheatley uses Cain in a positive light because she argues that Black Christians will have a place in heaven and join the angelic train. Therefore, Wheatley uses the Cain allusion to reference someone of biblical importance in an optimistic way. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that I italicize. I'm going to make sure that I italicize Christians and Negroes. And so I'm feeling pretty good about this, right, writers? Let's take a look at this high school paragraph one more time, and then we'll sort of have each paragraph, the middle school and the upper level high school paragraph back to back here. Taking it from the top, right, writers? Thank you so much for your patience. Phyllis Wheatley's poem on being brought from Africa to America uses allusion. Allusion is when a writer makes a reference to someone or something of importance. For example, in the poem, the narrator uses a simile disguised as an allusion. And we could even say the writer. Remember, Christians, Negroes black as Cain may be refined and join the angelic train. Here, Wheatley compares Negroes to the Old Testament's Cain. Readers who know his biblical story, and maybe we can just take out his story. I'm going to keep it in. His biblical story, understand that Cain was jealous of his brother Abel and murdered him because Cain felt as if God favored his brother. After Abel's murder, Cain was banished. Indeed, Wheatley understands and knows that certain white Christians view black Christians in a negative light. In addition, she even changes the font to address her specific audience, Christians and Negroes. However, in the poem, Wheatley uses Cain, and maybe I will make this italics, uses Cain in a positive light because she argues that black Christians will have a place in heaven and join the angelic train. Therefore, Wheatley uses the Cain allusion to reference someone of biblical importance in an optimistic way. And so in this case, this reference is used positively rather than negatively. So she sort of flips the script and almost uses the Cain contradiction, this Cain idea in an optimistic or a positive way. All right, writers, I feel pretty confident with this analysis, and I'm going to go ahead and move all of this brainstorming that we did, all of this, and so we can look at our middle school and then our upper level or high school paragraph so we can see how this was set up And you can really start to see the difference between the upper level, the middle school paragraph versus our high school paragraph. So kind of moving these out of the way. And again, part of your role as a writer is to identify, how do you want to set this up? How do you want to use your text evidence and set yourself up for success, and addressing your readers and setting yourself up with your paragraphs? So here we have our middle school paragraph, our upper level high school paragraph. Thank you so much, Right Writers, for joining me today. Thank you to Phyllis Wheatley and her poem from the late 1700s on being brought from Africa to America. Thank you to Poetry Foundation for giving us the opportunity to see this poem. And thank you to you, Right Writers, for sticking it out to the end of this video. I really appreciate you subscribing to my channel. I hope these videos are useful to you and ensure your success as writers and give you power as a writer. Thank you again. Love you guys. Take care. Bye-bye.